Testing, testing, one, two, three.
Hello, Eric. How are you?
Would you mind saying hello just so I can make sure my headphones are working? I've had some issues with these.
Oh, hi, Eric. Can you hear me now?
Hear you.
You can't hear me? Because I did say hi to you before.
Afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Give it a couple minutes to let people join on.
Could someone talk so I can see if
Sure thing, Laura.
it is working? Good. Okay, thanks. It's like it's very, very quiet.
I was trying to give everybody a couple minutes to get on here. I think Steve Zaretti, I know, will not be attending today. I guess he actually just had his wife just had a baby, so he's a little busy right now. And I think Sam, do you know if Quat was planning on coming?
I am not sure. I know Steve Cadwalder's on, but not quite.
Okay. Okay.
I'm expecting Quat to come on, but I don't know for sure.
Why don't we give him one more minute and then we'll get started.
Oh, emails.
Okay.
Okay. Well, it's 1:03. I think it makes sense for us to get started here, and hopefully Quat can join us. Thanks for taking the time. I hope everybody had a great few days off last week. I know we did here in my house. We had 15 people, so actually was kind of happy to go back to work, weirdly enough, once all that stuff was over. So um, at any rate, figure I'll get started really quickly with a quick update. From myself here, I had an opportunity to speak with Representative Jonathan Steinberg, the House Chair of the Energy and Technology Committee this week, just to try to get an understanding, as we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, as to what he was looking for and whatnot. And I think that the biggest takeaway I had from him was that he's very open-minded, and I think Representative Buckby, who's the House ranking member, who I've spoken with as well, voiced a similar opinion that what they really want to see is there really some value that we can pull out of this, from any different angle that we can come up with. And I know that it was pretty vague, as I pointed out to Representative Steinberg, and he agreed that sometimes the legislature does that deliberately, or is simply trying to point us in a direction, say, hey, give us more information. And I think in this case, that's certainly the issue here. And he was open-minded as to anything we can come up with from this task force, but also, even if it's simply we need to study this more, that would obviously be a reasonable response as well. So that was pretty much the takeaway. So still wide open. I don't know if that's necessarily hugely helpful for us, but I think it does kind of give me an indication, at least, as to where the House chair was coming from here, and where the ranking member was coming from on this as well. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me when with regard to my conversations.
So what the message was is there any value to what we can get out of this with respect to hydro? And what is it besides that they wanted our charge to be?
Well, obviously, I mean the very basic language was, what benefits does existing hydropower bring to the table? I think that Representative Steinberg was pretty clear that he's open to trying to find ways to leverage it more efficiently, more effectively, but also if in fact we should be focusing our attention on smaller hydro as opposed to other things that might benefit the state more greatly from the attention. So, obviously, we have a limited amount of hydro in the state, and he's looking for direction in terms of what we can do to maintain what we have, but also if it's truly worth maintaining. I think is a good way to take away what he said. And I will mention, I noticed that is it Alicia has joined us. I just want to have you introduce yourself if you would, and go from
Sure.
there.
Hi,
I
Len.
apologize for not recognizing you earlier.
That's quite all right. Alicia Sharmat. I am the executive director of Rivers Alliance of Connecticut, and had testified on this task force bill during the legislative session. And just am interested in following what the task force is doing, and of course, providing our perspective when needed, and to provide resources as well to the task force.
Thank you for joining. I'm sorry I just butchered your name. It's Alicia.
Quite all right. It's an unusual spelling.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the group here, and I guess we'll barring any more conversation about the takeaway from the chairs, which is still pretty much wide open. I figure we might be able to move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is a discussion of the findings from surrounding state policies, but also I know Stephen sent us a pretty good amount of information yesterday with regard to what is available. So I don't know if it's all right, Stephen, if you don't mind kind of going through some of the basics here and starting off the conversation. I think that would be helpful. If he's there.
Yes, I'm here just having trouble finding my mute. To unmute. I think the main takeaway is that it's a little hard to determine exactly what kind of benefits solar and wind are getting, because most of the stuff is going out to bid now. And so what we have some caps, and the caps are at between 15 and 19 cents additional benefits, including separate from energy. But they actually go out to bid, and the bids have been coming in lower than those caps. So it's not clear that there's actually 15 or 19 cents bonus for solar and wind. And we have limited information about what other states are doing in terms of the value of their RECs. I think large hydro does qualify for some RECs, and certain dams, depending on when they were built, also have availability for RECs, and those details are in the information I sent. I'm not sure if you want more than that or not, Glenn.
Well, I appreciate you kind of going through it here, and I know what I'm trying to do is just kind of spur the conversation, really, and get some takeaways here. I know that Duncan had mentioned as well that he was going to take a look at some of the different REC programs that were available in some of the neighboring states. I think Steve already was going to as well, but unfortunately, Steve is out of pocket today. But I can certainly reach out to him to have him send over whatever information he was able to glean from his findings as well. Go ahead, Duncan.
Okay, right. Steve, thanks for sending that information about rate 980 and SG2, which are the two wholesale rates that I call the fallback rate that hydro can get, but it's very, very low numbers. but unfortunately, hydro, a lot of them are resorting to those low numbers. Rate 980 is averaging about 3 cents a kilowatt hour over the past 5 years. And over the last 2 months, it's been about 2.4 cents. So it's still very low. So those are available. 980 for Eversource, SG2 for UI, but they're very low rates, and you can't survive on those with a hydro project. So the programs with Pura, NRES and SCEF, it's my understanding that those programs are kind of tailored for solar and hydro. It's very difficult to make hydro happen with those just because of the structure of a hydro project versus the structure of a solar type of project. Hydro is not akin to bidding. We have to deal with FERC licensing and all sorts of preempts that must be done. So those programs, unless somebody knows different, are not really applicable for hydro. So that leaves us with no real programs in Connecticut for hydro. Other states, I'm still working on this. I got a long email that I've done, but I haven't sent it yet to all you members and others, providing some information because I'm not really complete on it. But I do know pretty much that every other New England state, other than Connecticut, provides rates for hydro, existing or planned future projects at basically the retail rate. And these are net energy billing type of tariffs. So every hydro project consumes a little bit of energy. So you can call that a user. And then you put a meter on that runs in both directions. Most of the time it'll be running in the direction where you're producing more energy than you're consuming. For that energy that you're producing and sending out to the grid, you're getting paid the retail rate. If it goes for a month when there's no water, let's say, and you're consuming, then it spins the other way and you get a bill. You have to pay that retail rate. So that's how they do it for a net energy billing. And that's what I would like to see happen in Connecticut. There was also some questions about what happened back in the 1980s with Connecticut DPUC at the time. In December 1985, they passed a decision 850416 providing QFs with a standard 30-year energy purchase contract with the utilities, front-loaded rates based on annually approved avoided costs. And that's all according to PURPA. PURPA mandated the states to come up with avoided costs. That is, avoided costs is defined as that expensive project that has to throttle down when another project comes online to maintain stability in the grid. And that would be on the margin. It would be the most expensive, generator that's out there. So that's what avoided cost is. So I'm still researching other states. I think a couple others maybe offered to check out New Hampshire. Is there anybody out there that's gotten any other information about other states?
So I see Mariana and Eric both have their hands up, but I will just very quickly add, I do know, or I should say, I am familiar with Maine's to a degree. Maine does have a qualifications for RECs for existing hydropower. I know that some of our facilities, for example, qualify for Maine Class 1, and some of our facilities qualify for Maine Class 2s as well. And that's obviously a very important revenue source for a lot of different hydros. Connecticut, unfortunately, removed qualifications, as you mentioned, I think at our last meeting, Duncan, for hydropower to qualify as a Class 2 resource. I want to say that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But, some of the other states do have programs. Maine seems to be the most logical for, at least for our facilities that are actually located here in Connecticut. But that is information. I don't have the exact information off the top of my head right now, but I can certainly send it and share it with the group. Marianne, I see you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, thank you. I spoke to a few folks, particularly about Vermont and Rhode Island, and somebody else that knew a little bit more about the Class 2 RECs, and they concur with what you're saying, Len, about Massachusetts having Class 2 RECs available for existing hydro. from what I talk to folks about, and for you all to know, I talk to developers that have done projects, hydro projects in Vermont and in Rhode Island, and then I talk to SIA. I don't know if folks know who SIA is, but they do a lot of work on the REX world. And their understanding was that most other states were compensating existing hydro also under the wholesale rate, not under the retail rate. So Duncan, this was sort of said as their understanding of it. It would be interesting to know if there's a particular state that you've talked to that is compensating on the retail rate. Vermont is compensating through net metering for projects that are less than 500 kilowatts. And Rhode Island and both Vermont have a program where hydro is valued in a sort of in a specific way. One's for projects less than 2.2 megawatts in Vermont, and in Rhode Island less than 5 megawatts. But this is for new hydro, not for existing hydro. New Hampshire has class 4 RECs explicitly for existing assets, for existing hydro assets less than 5 megawatts. And usually class 2 RECs where they're trading is between $20 to $25 a megawatt hour. I sent these notes, Sam, I believe, to you yesterday. They're very bullet form, but if you want to share them with the group here, that has sort of the summary of the findings that I was able to gather. I want us to think about, and Eric, I know you're next, but I do want us to think about if, and especially Len, it seems like what you got from Representative Steinberg is that the focus is on existing hydropower. If what this group wants to think about is recommendation on existing or new hydropower, I do think that with the NRES tariff, there is a path, somewhat of a path for new hydro, but some tweaks might be necessary. Existing hydro, I think, is a separate one. And I would be interested to see, especially Duncan, with the study that you've made, it seems like there's 10 megawatts of projects that could potentially come offline that are sort of in the lingo of being decommissioned if they don't fall under the class 1 definition of RECs, which talks about beginning operation after July 1st, 2003. So I think maybe knowing where those, I don't know, maybe thinking about, is that where we want to focus on the 10 megawatts of the power plants that might come offline, and what is the cost, right, to ratepayers and the state on its renewable portfolio standards if those come offline? And think about, is this a way to do it through valuing electricity or through RECs, and is there a path on either of those sides?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I appreciate the insight there. I didn't see your notes, but it looks like Sam just sent them through to us, so we'll be able to take a look at that. Eric, what's you hop in?
So yeah, I'm not necessarily on the topic that we've been talking about, but really just kind of going back to what Steve had presented originally, which I really appreciate the extra research that was done there. It seems to be telling us that we are still talking, apples and oranges as we're thinking about different types of renewables and trying to get some sort of comparison. And there are different programs and all that. I guess I should say I'm not surprised, but a little disappointed that there isn't some way to, think about this issue a bit more holistically. And on that topic too, I was wondering, because I think most of the conversation that the task force has had so far, it has to do with small hydro. And I want to make sure that as we're thinking about, is large hydro and small hydro also apples and oranges, or are there some things that that Duncan mentioned are, maybe the current rates for small hydro that might be different for large hydro? I think it's important for us to have some appreciation there. And I will say, I guess once more, and I apologize for saying a bunch of different things here, but that, I can certainly imagine that one thing that would be a sticking point potentially for our agency, if we're hoping to have a consensus report at the end of the task force, is to get into some of those facilities that might be going through decommissioning for various reasons, because there are lots of different reasons. I don't think they're all solved by the price of energy at a price that folks would be willing to pay. It's just kind of keeping that in mind too. And so I find those to be the most problematic when we think about what might be consensus recommendations that come from the task force. But anyway, the most significant thing that I was just hoping to make sure we don't miss out on is observations on some of the similarities or differences between small and large hydro.
I will speak just to mention, or just to address that to a degree, because my company has both. They are in a different spot, I think, from a finance point of view. A larger hydro obviously is easier to keep afloat because of economies of scale. They're not as strained financially as the smaller ones. If you're looking at this from an existential point of view, the larger hydros are not in danger of closing right now, but some of the smaller ones are. That's not to say that couldn't happen. It just, at some point down the line. But right now, it's. I think the urgency is a little bit different from a smaller hydro perspective than a larger hydro perspective. That said, the electrons are still coming from water powered, whether it's small, large, whatever it is, and our company certainly has a perspective as to how they should be valued. We believe that there should be some changes made, but that's not something that I'll get into here. Obviously, this is a little bit of a different type of meeting. So I see Alicia does have her hand up here, and please join in.
Thanks. I have a clarifying question for Mariana. Mariana, when you said new hydro, were you talking about new hydro on an existing dam, or were you referring to new hydro meaning new infrastructure, new facilities?
I was referring to new hydropower in a new facility. It would need to qualify under the NRES program.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a requirement for that to be in a new or existing dam.
Okay. And Len, just a quick question for you on what you had just said. What are when you're looking at that sort of line between small hydro and new hydro and viability, and I understand it may differ from facility to facility, but in general, what do you consider megawatt wise small and large hydro?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it will depend on who you're asking. So you're asking somebody who represents a company that's relatively large in the New England hydro space. We have different resources that we're able to put into some of our smaller facilities that I think a more independent shop, like, for example, what Duncan does. I know there are a couple of other hydro owners in the state of Connecticut that are literally, they're kind of just hanging on by their fingernails, whereas my company, First Light, can adjust to the needs based off of a much larger pool of resources. That said, if we look at a single plant, like, I'll give you an example. We have a very small plant in Colebrook, our Robertsville facility. It's about 600 kilowatts, give or take, capacity. That facility is severely financially constrained. It hasn't operated in over 10 years, and that's simply because it hasn't been economical for us to basically to put the money into it and fix it. And that's an unfortunate situation. We're not going to remove it. We're not going to take down the dam as of right now, but still it's an issue that it just hasn't made financial sense for us to do that, simply based off of the available revenue streams that are out there. And Duncan has mentioned the wholesale markets and whatnot. That's a legitimate concern for a small facility like that. If you look at something like facility like we have in Scotland, Connecticut. It's a little bit bigger. We did put about $5 million into a brand new fish passage facility for that hydro, even though it's not a very large hydro. I think it's, off the top of my head, I want to say it's 5 megawatts. So somewhere in that range is probably where you'd find it, but it would depend probably on who you ask and what their priorities are as a company or as an individual owner. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Well, the reason I'm asking is because, as you may know, last legislative session, the definition of small hydro was increased from 30 to 60 megawatts. And many of us on the river advocacy side and environmental side thought 60 megawatts didn't sound small to us. So I think it's important for us, or for the task forces that are going forward, to really kind of think about possibly where that line could be as far as viability goes. And if that change from 30 to 60 is something that actually makes sense policy wise when you're looking at that line of viability.
No, that's certainly a consideration. I think I just cut somebody off. Who did I cut? I'm sorry, Duncan, go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead. All right. On the question on small versus large, there's certainly a difference between small and large when it comes to the economics of these projects. And if you read my paper on page 2, I talk about where I drew the line at 3.5 megawatts for Connecticut. The reason I chose that as a threshold is threefold. The recently decommissioned facilities are all below 3.5 megawatts. The facilities threatened to be decommissioned are all below 3.5 megawatts. Almost all undeveloped dams are under 3.5 megawatts. So it seems to be the number here for our purpose. If we wanted to talk about large versus small, I put it at 3.5 megawatts. And if you look at other states, they also put a number in for programs that they have are good for, everything under so many megawatts. So I want us to be clear on when we're talking about comparing rates and so on, that we know what we're talking about in terms of those three components that are generated that come off of that copper wire that's coming out of the generator. That's energy, capacity, and RECs. So I've been talking pretty much energy all the way along when I talk about, let's see if we can get them the retail rate, but let's see if we can do net energy billing or something like that. The RECs, it's an important part too, but that's a whole separate subject, really. So we shouldn't mix the two. And I know when I talked about in like other states, Massachusetts, I did actually talk to an owner that's running a project up there. And she said, yes, Duncan, we do net energy billing and we get paid the retail rate for our electrons for the energy. And as far as RECs or capacity goes, she does that on the side, she sells those on her own, not part of the program that they have with Massachusetts. So I think I am correct in saying that the other New England states pretty much offer the retail rate for the energy, for the electrons. As far as RECs go, it's all over the place. In Connecticut, class 1 is limited. You can Google, RECs, RPS in Connecticut and see how that's done. Let's see here. Okay, I'm pulling it up. Let's see. So for Connecticut, for class 1, it is defined as hydro, run-of-river facility that began operation after July 1st, 2003, and has a generating capacity of not more than 30 megawatt. This is for class 1 Connecticut. Or a run-of-river hydropower facility that received a new license after January 1st, 2018. and provided the facility is not based on a new dam or a dam identified as a candidate for removal. So that's class 1 Connecticut. So that's only
Are
new
you looking at
projects.
an old statute, Duncan? Because I believe it got moved up to 60 megawatts last session.
I could very well be
I
looking
think
at.
you are. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So the only difference is 30 to 60. I don't know. We'd have to check that. But
I think
right. I mean, Connecticut class 1 is limited to new projects. We have to admit that, right? This doesn't cover existing, and it won't help out the ones that are have been taken offline. In class 2, there's no hydro. In class 3, there's no hydro. So that's just the basic summary on that.
to be clear too, I just want to add, and then I'm going to jump to Mariana here. As I was going to say before, I think the existential question that Duncan brings up is part of our charge to certainly take a look at, what's in trouble. One of the other things that I think this task force has been charged with is, what are the benefits or potential benefits? I think with a larger hydro system, we're probably looking at a very different question, which is what can we do with the existing larger hydro that would make it more effective, more efficient, whether it's adding things to the dams or I should say to the facilities that isn't going to impact the dam or the water flow, like different types of turbines or something like that. Or importantly, how do you use this to work with other renewables to address the climate change situation that we have in Connecticut and some of the policies? I think that is where the larger hydro is probably going to come into play with this task force. At least that's my perspective on that. So I don't want to just say, well, we should only focus on the little stuff, because even though I think that's hugely important, I also think it's important for us to focus on the other pieces of what we can do with the existing resources we have. And that's what I was going to say before. Mariana?
Yeah, no, that all is great. I concur with you that we should sort of try to focus on what it is that it's in trouble, because the recommendations or even the insights from this group would be different based on size. I think where I was going at, Duncan, with regards to looking at renewable energy credits is that there's 3 different ways to compensate hydro, as you pointed out: capacity, RECs, or energy. I will totally say that if other states are providing retail rates to hydropower and we can demonstrate that, then that's one way to do so. It was, from my findings, that wasn't the case. But again, it wasn't focused on Massachusetts, and I don't know if that's true for the project that you looked at, or if that was sort of a newer project, or if it's something that's been licensed, if an existing project falls under that. And Len, I know you guys have a bunch of assets. I wonder how your electricity is being valued, if it's mostly retail rates or
No, it's
wholesale rates. All wholesale.
Yeah.
That was what I came across too. And so that's why I said, okay, if we can't use other states as a benchmark, like, look, they're doing retail rates. And again, I could be proven wrong on that. Then a different way to compensate hydro could be through renewable energy credits or through capacity. Capacity seems harder. But that's why I brought in sort of the idea of, is there something outside of retail rates that we can think of that can help to compensate hydro? But I go back to your point, Len, let's focus on a subset of that, because currently renewable energy credits are available for projects. Existing projects came in operation after July 1st, 2003. I don't know, Duncan, if you have, within the study that you've done, if any of those projects that are threatened to decommission came online before or after 2003, and if that has alleviated or helped at all.
Right. They came online earlier, so they cannot get class 1 RECs.
Got it.
I mean,
So
again, just look at my paper. Talks about the dates that they got their FERC permits and so on. So, right, the REC, the whole REC area is complicated. The problem is if you all of a sudden say in Connecticut that certain hydro projects are eligible, let's say for class 1, you're bringing in potential projects from all the other states, the ISO New England family. And that can swamp the market, and then the price goes down, it goes all over the place. There's nothing that you can bring to a bank. It's complicated. Some states have in some of their RPSs that they limit it to this situation only for projects in their state. Connecticut has not done that. We have not come out and said for Connecticut projects only these are qualified for class 1, but that has happened. It's complicated. So that's why I and even Rep Steinberg recommended just stick with talking about energy for now. Keep it simple. Look at what the other states are doing. Provide an offer. Provide a program, and that might be the best way to go. So we need to decide if we want to talk about RECs or energy. Capacity is not something we want to talk about. That's done, for bigger projects through ISO. So I think
it may be that maybe we want to be more vague. We can mention these things in a report to the legislature and say, hey, this is how, for example, this is how Maine does it. They have a certain level of qualifications for renewable energy credits, and some people or some organizations, participate in those markets and some don't. I don't anticipate this task force getting into capacity markets and that sort of thing. I think that's well beyond the scope of this task force, at least in my perspective, is in that. But we can mention it as being a revenue source that is leveraged by some, not by all. Most of the issues are in the energy markets or the qualifications for RECs in Connecticut specifically, and then point to some of the other states. That's at least my view on it. But I don't think we should get into capacity markets at all. I see Laura's had her hand up for a little while. Go ahead, Laura. You're on mute.
It's just a point of clarification. I'm new to the discussion relating to rates. So I'm trying to hear what's consistent here. And I'm still not hearing that. I've heard from, it looks like Mariana and Len, and sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right, Mariana, that most of the states compensate at the wholesale rate, but Duncan has said that most of the states compensate at the retail rate. Do we have a final clarification on that, or is this just something we still have to look into? I had thought Duncan went and checked on this, and he was reporting back from what he checked on, but it sounds like Mariana did the same, and she's saying, and Len, you're saying that it's the wholesale rate. So I'm just looking for some clarification. Those seem to be in direct conflict still in my mind.
To be clear, from what I said, our projects only qualify for wholesale rates. I'm not aware of any opportunities for retail rates for hydro in any of the other states that we would qualify for, but that's not to say there may be something out there that I'm not aware of. I didn't check on retail rates in the other states, so I can't speak for that. I think Duncan did some research. If Duncan, if you can share perhaps that information directly with the group, perhaps after this meeting, I think that would help clarify that conversation and give us some insight as to what it actually is there. And Mariana, same with you. If you have any information, I think you did send something and Sam just sent it out, so I haven't looked at it yet. I apologize.
I did, but unfortunately, what I sent is like trying to prove the counterfactual, right? Is that they're not compensated. The only thing that I could find that says that they are compensated via net metering was in Vermont for less than 500 kilowatts. But I will say that my search was, and my conversations were only with folks in these two states, and with SIA. So
okay,
those were my 5 days.
So in Vermont, under 500 kilowatts, they were compensated at the retail rates, but that's the only place you could find that.
Yes, and I will make the asterisk here that this is for existing hydro. For new hydro, there's sort of separate programs where these assets can participate and get higher compensation.
I will research this more, but I'm telling you, I called a hydro owner up in Massachusetts. I talked with her. She's an existing project, not new, and she's getting the retail rate. But I'll look into it more. We just have to be careful. We have to keep clear on existing versus new, because those might be two different programs. We have to keep clear that we're talking energy, not RECs. So we'll continue on that and report and show what the other states offer. But
if you can get
one of the
somebody, if you can get a link or some kind of a direction for us to be able to see perhaps the policy, on their state website, whatever it is, in the state statute. I don't know if she can direct you to where she found that so that they would qualify. That would probably be helpful. I don't want to speak for Laura, but that would be helpful for me to be able to clarify that would be applicable here.
another individual that is maybe trying to get on this task force, we're still missing that 8th member, right? Is
Okay.
John Petrillo. John Petrillo works for Gravity Renewables. Gravity owns 3 sites in Connecticut, and he's very knowledgeable about these things. Sam, are you with us? Do you know the status of getting our 8th member?
I'm here. I can follow up with SDO to see where we're at with that.
Yeah, I know with John, they asked him for his resume, he submitted it, and there it sits. So even if he's not elected as a member, maybe is it okay if John helps us with this question about other New England states, what they offer? Or is it's okay for him to come and sit in even? Like there's others sitting in today. So
I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't have. I mean, I'm just going to speak for myself. I know. I don't think, Alicia, are you officially an appointed member of the task force? I don't think you are, but
no, but I've been on other task force and legislative commissions, and they've all been open to the public. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit surprising that these meetings, this information isn't available on the Energy and Technology Committee's webpage, because normally these task force and commissions are posted for the public to get all of the information they need. And there were a lot of folks that sat in on the last legislative commission that I was appointed to. So
yeah, you're certainly welcome to be here. I wanted to double check and make sure you hadn't been appointed.
No, I understand. I was just explaining that it's
yeah. So yeah, Sam, maybe check on the posting. I know that the agendas are supposedly being posted publicly, so it should be up there. But I admittedly don't look at the CGA website on a regular basis, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you find that information and can send it to me, that would be helpful. I have other people who would like to listen in, at least, if not sit in.
Oh, absolutely. I will say that I think when it comes to making decisions and whatnot, we'll obviously keep it to the task force members very specifically. But in my opinion, the more information we can glean, the better. I certainly don't want to lose track of our task force members, though, because I do want to make sure that we can get through the agendas and have a discussion that is pertinent and doesn't devolve into a lobbying session, if you will. But that being said, I do want to move to the next item just to make sure we don't run out of time here. I know we only have about 15 minutes left in the schedule to hit the additional reports and information from members. I don't want to derail this discussion per se, but I do want to make sure that if others had other things that they wanted to bring up in terms of information that they want to bring to the table and leverage as part of the task force, I want to make sure that we have the time to talk about it. So I'm going to open it up. I know we mentioned it in the last meeting. I know Duncan brought forth a study for us or a white paper for us to consider at the beginning of this. And I know that others might have had other things. And I see Eric did raise his hand. So Eric, why don't you jump in?
Okay, so I had 2 quick things. One, it also falls into the category of clarification, like Laura was asking for earlier. And that is, I just want to make sure that when we're talking about new hydro, we're talking about a hydro facility at an existing dam, right?
I believe that's the way it's described in the statute specifically, that anything that currently under the statute, anything that is considered to be new has to be at an existing dam that's not under consideration, I think, by the DEP for removal and that sort of thing.
Yes, so that's my understanding as well. I just want to make sure that we have a common understanding there. The other was just looking forward to February when when we want to have a ideally a consensus report with some recommendations. So suggest two things that might be helpful. One is if we get to the point where folks feel like they would like to make some legislative related recommendations to the group, with the hope that it might be able to be endorsed across the various interests across this group, I would certainly encourage folks to do that. And I think we also should think about, and maybe this is between now and maybe the next or following session, is if we feel like there are some issues that we can't come to consensus on, if we allow for ourselves some sort of like minority report or some way to capture some good information that I think folks are trying to share and discuss, but to really distinguish between those things that are consensus supported and those that may have some support but not all.
I would be in favor of that approach, Eric. I think that's reasonable from my perspective, but I certainly don't want to speak for the whole group. And I love the idea of our next meeting, if we can start coming up with some recommendations that maybe each individual organization or a person has. I think that would be helpful. Obviously, we want to have the background information to be able to make sound decisions, but I think specific recommendations, if people have them already, would be helpful from a directional standpoint as to where we go in our next conversations and whatnot. And I see.
A quick follow-up on that point, and thank you, Len, for your support of it. I think many of us might not be the ones who can say, yes, we support this, but we'll have to take it back to others to take a look. So the earlier we can get some of those ideas out, the better off we're going to be in trying to consider them. But anyway, I appreciate, I learn something every time we meet, and really appreciate all of them.
Thank you, Eric. I see Laura, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, your mic is not working that well. You sound a little like you're underwater. It was working earlier. I don't know why it's not now. Just on the under consideration for removal side of things, the 4 spreadsheets that Duncan provided us earlier, I will say that multiple dams on those spreadsheets are under consideration for removal.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I'm not aware of which ones, except for I think the only one I know of for sure is the one on the Naugatuck River in Seymour. I think it's called
Kinneytown and Lower Collinsville are 2 of those. There are at least 1 or 2 others that are thinking about, but those are the 2 obvious ones.
Right. Well, I'll be pleased to make that modification to my study there. Kinneytown, we all know about Lower Collinsville, so that fish can get up to Upper Collinsville. And if there's any others, Laura, please let me know, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Duncan.
Sure. I might take this up.
Data very helpful.
Sure. So I might take this opportunity to let's look at what we have to do. I mean, we're charged with an assignment here, folks, and we have to get on the ball to do that by February 1st, right?
Yep.
So, I just want us to keep our goal in mind here to outline the benefits of hydro, to provide, to discuss any value that we can get that's out there on projects that could be put online, could be kept online, or could be put back online. And if there's projects that should not be put online, I'm all ears on that. I realize that there's some that shouldn't be in existence or not online for whatever reason, and that's fine. So I think that it would be good to hear about those projects more. If there's some that in my lists on my study, let's not include these types of projects. That's fine, but I'd like to work towards our goal of listing the benefits. I got them on page 1 here, and there's some that aren't here, like recreation. I don't think oh yeah, I did mention recreation in the third one. And then let's here's something bold. Let's take my study, modify it, and submit it, and that's our report. Okay, take my study, let's modify it. I don't care if it's totally redlined or take it all as is, somewhere in between. Let's edit it. Let's work on editing my study and then submit it. It's a good outline. It's got all the projects listed. I spent a lot of time on it. I'm not saying it's totally accurate. I'm not saying it's the best thing since sliced bread, but it's a good place to start. I mean, it seems like that would be a good way to go. Everybody come out with their recommendations. Hey, let's take out this sentence they put in here about projects that, are listed for decommissioning. Put a different recommendation here on, what these projects should get. And go like that. What do you think?
I see Alicia's actually trying to weigh in here. Why don't you hop in, Alicia?
Sure. I think that I don't think Duncan, your study was very thorough, but it is from the hydropower perspective. And while the legislation is very specific about benefits, the fact is you can't. So when you're looking to make a decision, right, you have pros, but you never just look at the pros, right? You have to look at the cons to balance the decision-making process. And while hydro can be beneficial for some recreation, it is detrimental for other methods of recreation, to the point where they can cancel each other out. And also to the point where some of the recreation that benefits, there have been cases that have caused such water quality issues that, those recreational activities aren't even possible anymore on some impoundments. So I think it's really important that we find that middle ground. I don't necessarily, and I know I'm not a member of the task force, but I don't think it's appropriate to take one side and take that report and move it forward. I think we can definitely take pieces from your very well done report, but I think it would be beneficial to hear for some other regional folks. I know the Hydropower Reform Coalition and Eve Vogel from Massachusetts would be really happy to speak to this group, and I think it would be a good perspective to hear from folks that are looking at hydropower on the regional scale. And I think both groups do have a good balanced perspective on being able to utilize hydro while minimizing the environmental and public health impacts of hydropower.
Okay, well, agreed. I think I said I agree that there are projects that should not be put back online. There are dams that should be taken down, but then there's others that should be encouraged, and they should be given equitable rates instead of 3 cents a kilowatt hour when solar and wind are getting 20 cents or whatever. What's fair about that? And there's impacts to every project. I don't care what it is. But no, I agree. So we can come up with a study, and we'll have a little list, or we'll have a list there also that talks about detriment or negative impacts. But let's not try to replace the FERC process here. We're working on an act that's given us a charge to talk about hydro and the benefits. And is there something that we should be doing there to help out these projects that are going bankrupt and that are sitting there and not running, and the owners are walking away, and so on? So the FERC process, you got to admit, is very thorough. We're not here to, okay.
Sir, the FERC from the nonprofit perspective, the FERC process, it is not necessarily, you can't you can't characterize the FERC process as environmentally protective. You can't. It's not.
I don't want to devolve into a debate on obviously on FERC relicensing or anything like that. I do think that I'd love to hear from some of the other members of the task force in terms of Duncan's proposal and also Alicia's response to it. I will give my perspective. I don't think we should necessarily have a document that just extols the virtues of hydro without pointing out some of the detriments as well, and some of the obvious issues that we have to face and mitigate if possible, whether it's by removing dams, removing hydros, or letting them go out of business if that needs to be the case, such as it is with Kinneytown, for example. But I also want to make sure that we're on point with what the legislature has asked for, which is, very specifically, okay, what are the benefits? What can we do with it? Are there opportunities? Are there opportunities for us to leverage it more effectively? Are there opportunities for us to eliminate some of them that really are just anchors around the neck of the state and aren't really serving much of a value? That to me, I want to make sure that we're on point. And I do want to hear from other task force members if I can. And if nobody has a response as of right now, we can certainly consider it and bring it back to the next meeting. But I see Laura and Eric, so I'll go in that order. Laura's on mute again.
Every bloody time you think after, what is it, like 3 years now, right? I just want to remind folks that at the very end of the last task force meeting, I did list some of my concerns with that report. I think it could be edited and made more balanced. I think there are parts of it that are very useful. I'm very pro us getting data out, real data, not like hearsay, but like data on this issue. So I don't think that ever hurts anyone, just real information of what people need to make decisions based on. I do think, and these are the comments I made last time, is that if we do need to talk about the pros and cons. You can't list the benefits that are in that report without also discussing the impacts. I did make that point last time. I mentioned also that there were some of the dams on that spreadsheet that are being actively considered for dam removal, and that should be put on it. And that I do believe, as Duncan has just said, and I know Alicia believes as well, but that there is a balance here, that there are dams that are just not going to make any sense anymore. But there are going to be dams that make a lot of sense, and a lot of sense for hydro, and we should be talking about what's appropriate for those as well. So I think there is a balance out there. I think we can strike a balance. I worry if we just jump into Duncan's document, we're at least I'm working against something that was very much written by the hydro perspective. And I don't want to come across negative. I want to be like collaborative, and I want to kind of come up with a balance together. So I think there's a lot of good information and data to be taken from this. And I think there's a lot of additional data we can gather. And I think we can come up with something pretty balanced.
So I just wanted to speak to, I agree with what Laura just put forward. I think, I think it would be hard to take what you put together, Duncan, which again, I agree is very well done and thoughtful and has a lot of good information in it, and just try to edit it and say, this is our report. I think it needs to have a slightly different approach, structure. I mean, as we talked about earlier, it's just focused on small hydro at current, and it's I think and I think you I'm not saying you disagree with this, Duncan, at all, but just could use some rounding out. I know that it's not going to be easy to come to a place where we have full consensus, and what we might also find is that some of the recommendations that we make are going to end with something like, but all of these different potential hydro facilities are located in different places that have different site characteristics, and to make kind of broad sweeping generalizations across everything might be difficult and it might require some additional individual study, but at least if we can winnow things down to the areas that we think are going to be most fruitful for doing additional study, I think that would be a step forward, even if that's as far as we've gone.
To me, the net result of efforts here that I've been working on for year after year and failing every year is to give hydro the rates that it deserves, similar to solar and wind. We can't survive on 3 cents. So with that in mind, let me ask you, if today the legislator passed an act that says all hydro gets a retail rate, what is the fear in that? What is the negative of that? Are you worried about a project that should be decommissioned, running and getting good revenue and being able to afford to run? So that I'd like us to look at that. I mean, let's keep things in perspective on what is our goal here. To me, our goal is to provide hydro with decent rates. Okay, just show the benefits are out there. These projects are out there. Let's give them what they need and deserve. So what's so wrong with that? Give me a negative aspect of that. Are you worried about a project like Kinneytown or whatever getting more income so they can afford better facilities and operating it better? Or tell me what's feared out there.
Could I answer that slightly before we go on? So, and because I realize another hand went up too. Some dams don't make economic sense anymore, and we have put dams on public trust resource, and they are impacting a lot of things. They are impacting this natural resource. They are impacting the fisheries. They're impacting natural sediment transport. And so some make sense to remove right now. What I would be not pro is all of a sudden justifying the economics of something that doesn't have economic value right now and has environmental impact. And I think I speak for a lot of people in my field, are not anti-active hydropower plants, getting rates that are sustainable for them. I am very worried about the justification of a potential future rate on a dam that really has outlived its useful purpose and is ready for removal. And now holding it in place because of some potential future rate that it might have, some future benefit, economic benefit to some individual hydro operator. Because I am looking at the benefits for the river system overall and the health of the river system overall. If that helps.
I think there is definitely some disagreement here. I want to make sure I get to Mariana because she's had her hand raised, and I think we've jumped over her a little bit here. But go ahead, Mariana.
Oh, good discussion. And I want to jump in here just to say, I think we need to be mindful of that argument that solar is getting retail rates, because if you look at solar, most solar has come in since the ZREC program and the net metering program came in. We're not talking about existing solar from the 80s. And so those same programs that were available for solar in the last, 5-7 years would have been available for new hydropower. So it's a bit of comparing apples to oranges in that sense. I would venture to say, without having done a lot of research, that an existing solar project from the 90s would probably be getting wholesale rate as well, because when the ZREC tariff ends, and if you're not under net metering, and I can't say 20 years, like if in the 90s there was net metering, but I venture to say there wasn't, then you would be getting wholesale rates. So that's why I sometimes feel like you're comparing new solar to old hydro, which is not apples to apples. So I want to bring that forward as well. And going back to, I think, an earlier comment that Eric, you did, I think it would be worthwhile to come to our next meeting with each of us having developed maybe 2 or 3 recommendations, right? Like high level recommendations of the group. And Duncan, I can guess which one yours is going to be, and I understand where you're coming from. And we can work on those. Is that a recommendation we can all get on board? Can some of us get on board? What do we need to tweak it here and there? Is this something that we just don't feel like it is within this task force? Because I am feeling like it is very hard to move something forward. And I know all of us are feeling that and are coming at it from different directions. And so maybe that'll help us at least create a framework, and maybe we just come up with one or two recommendations, and then other considerations that this task force, or other sort of conclusions or considerations that this task force has come through some honestly great discussion. And I value folks that are coming here to say in different points and different sides of the coin. I think it's good that we're not all in agreement necessarily.
Thank you, Mariana. And I see, Alicia, I think you wanted to respond to what Duncan might have asked earlier. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with Mariana. It definitely wouldn't be fun if we all agreed. So Duncan, one of the things that came immediately to mind about when you asked that question was decommissioning costs, and whether those are considered when we look at the cost of either bringing a hydropower facility back online, or incentivizing something. Because let's face it, we have 4,000 dams in Connecticut. Only about, I would probably say, Duncan, would you say 10% of those are actually being utilized for anything? And that may actually be a high number. And the rest of them, the 90%, it's pretty much on public and private funding now to remove those dams. And my concern is going forward, if we make these profitable, what happens when they're not profitable anymore? And it's going to be on whom to clean up whatever is left. And that is, so I guess what I'm saying is I think it's very important that we consider decommissioning costs when we're looking at this incentive, and make sure that there is some sort of calculation to make sure that these are financially viable facilities.
So I appreciate that. I know we're over time here, and I don't want to be disrespectful of people's time, and we have a lot more, I think, discussion coming through here. It almost seems to me that this conversation needs to continue on. I do want to float a couple of ideas very quickly. One of them being, should we allocate a little more time in the next meeting to be able to actually get through some of the stuff? Because it seems like this is the second time we've run a little over, and that may be an issue for some. So I see some nods. What I'll do then, I think, Sam, I may put out for the next agenda, I may put in a 2-hour time slot just to ensure that we have enough time and we can get through a lot more information. I know we're going to probably one more meeting before the end of the year, because I have a feeling that most of us, including me, are going to be on a much anticipated vacation. So that 2-hour time slot may really come into play for us. In addition to that, the next meeting date and time.
Marina had a recommendation too of keeping things moving forward. I think you said in an email, what did you say, that maybe we should outline some of our recommendations in an email before the next meeting or something to that effect?
Yeah, come ready to talk about, like, write out a recommendation, a couple of recommendations, and be ready to discuss them, and hopefully have an open discussion and say, Laura, I disagree with you, or you're failing to see this, or we could sort of solve for that by adding this, and to really be a fruitful discussion, but starting from maybe can we come up with this recommendation as a group here? And I know I can come up with 2 or 3 things. Duncan, I'm sure you have a couple of things on your mind, and Laura and others, I'm sure you do as well too. And maybe that way we can, because it always feels like we're getting to the good part just as we have to hop off.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. No, I appreciate that recommendation. I would second, third, whatever that I am here with that. I think sending us home with homework is probably a really good idea. And it's probably the only way we're actually going to get anything done is if we actually do a lot of this work outside of this meeting moving forward. So, Obviously,
And sorry, can I just add one more thing? And if we do think that having somebody come in here that knows about what other states may be doing, that is helpful. I know I have a conversation coming up with the National Hydropower Association. If we think that having folks join for 10, 15 minutes, I know others were mentioned here. I don't have it in my notes. Then
HRC
maybe
and Eva Vogel were mentioned, and I would definitely recommend them.
maybe
Yep.
we can do that too.
yeah, we can certainly. I wouldn't recommend it for the next meeting simply because I want to make sure if we do have recommendations, we have enough time to get through it. But perhaps
Sure.
maybe in early January, that may make a lot of sense. And I think the next date would be Friday the 15th at 1 p.m. Does that still work for everybody? Okay. If it's an issue, let maybe email Sam and myself, and we can try to work with it.
Am I on mute or not? Hold on, not back in here.
No, you're not on mute.
Hold on 1 second. I think my dog is having surgery that day, Friday the 15th. Is there any way we can make it a little later in the day? I pick him up from surgery. Actually, wait, you said 1:15? He might still be well into surgery then. I should be able to pick up. I just might have to be at the doctor's office. Okay.
No
Because
worries.
they've made me hold from 8:30 to 3:30. So I guess it's okay if it's in the middle, because what am I doing? It's not like I'm assisting.
I hope it's not serious.
No. He has to be fixed. So
Oh.
so we don't say it too loud in front of him.
That's a smart move.
If he can join for the call, we'll have him. I gotta hop off.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your time, and I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Thanks all.